There is a referendum coming. We all know it. And I want to give you one reason to vote no. There can be no plan A, the currency union with the rest of the United Kingdom. And that should be enough. Opinion polls in the rest of the UK are 2-1 against it. The leading politicians in the rest of the UK are also aligned with public opinion and against it. And let's face it, why would English taxpayers want to stand behind Scottish banks when Scotland is an independent country? And if we're independent, why would we want them to have to do that? That's not very independent. English taxpayers before have stood behind Scottish banks and it cost them billions. And we're still paying for it. The Nationalists have published only one tax policy. They will undercut UK corporation tax. This is a policy designed to beggar our neighbour. And our neighbour is, of course, the rest of the UK. Mr. Salmond wants a mandate from the Scottish people for Plan A. But it's the English, Welsh and Northern Irish that will decide, not us. Which is fair, because they would have to pay for it if it all went tits up. Again. So it's going to be Plan B, using the pound without a central bank. And why not, some would say. It would force banks to be sensible when lending. Unfortunately, banks would have to be English first. Most of their customers are English, and frankly, who would deposit money in a Scottish bank when a bank down the road that isn't Scottish has a deposit guarantee when the Scottish one doesn't? I wouldn't, you wouldn't, and let's face it, English people wouldn't put their money in unsecured accounts when they have an option. So our banks will become based in England. Some of you will say, good riddance, and that will of course be good riddance to billions of pounds from the Scottish economy. There are 185,000 people employed in our financial services industry in Scotland. 7% of all the jobs in our country. It contributes more to our economy than oil. That's around £8.8 billion. Oil was 6.5 billion last year. And that's a business that has to go south. That's more than our education budget. Not just for this year, but for every year for the foreseeable future. Oops. Most business leaders that export or do significant business across borders have said no for two very good reasons. One, because most of their customers are not in Scotland, and two, because the cost of borrowing would be more through an unsecured currency. So the cost of doing business would be more. That means less jobs, less security and less public services. Mr. Salmond has suggested that Scotland being independent would drive our economy and has factored in a mysterious independent economic growth factor to add to make his sums add up. And I can only see jobs, people and money migrating south. There is no mystery growth factor. There is no independence dividend. This will mean increased costs to business and to families. If independence means that we will have many of our exporting businesses and all of our banks going south, we might have a fairer society, but it will be one that is much poorer. We will be equally impoverished. A currency union demands a similarity in economic policies, and I think it's fair to say the EU proved that. Mr. Swinney has said he plans to borrow billions to kickstart an independent Scotland's economy. He has also said there will be no share of the debt without a share of the assets, by which he meant the pound, which of course is actually not an asset. But let's not quibble over facts when opinions and emotions are so much more valid. The rest of the UK is trying to cut debt, and whilst they are trying to do that, we would be accruing more debt. On the Nationalists' most optimistic forecast, that will be £1 billion a month of borrowing. That's a big divergence. So you can understand from an English perspective why there should be no currency union. There may well be those who will lend us this £1 billion+ a month, but when we have no central bank and we have walked away from our share of the debt, how much would they charge us in interest for the privilege of spending their money on our vital public services? If we want independence, surely we would want interest rates set in Scotland, not England. Surely we would want our tax and our spending levels set in Scotland, not England. What the Yes campaign is advocating is less control than we have just now. When the Americans rebelled, they said no taxation without representation. Are we seriously advocating removing Scottish representation from the UK government, yet still advocating that they set our interest rates, our tax levels and our spending levels? This is, of course, absurd. This is not independence, but subjugation by the back door, and we'd be doing it to ourselves. Nationalists continually advocate that they need to be able to pull key economic levers to drive growth in our economy. However, what they actually propose means that all of the key economic levers will still be pulled from London, but, and this is the big but, we will have lost any power to influence them. This is not independence, but the most craven dependence that any nation could possibly endure. They know this. And they know they are peddling myths. These sort of lies do an injustice to us, our children and our children's children. If you care about Scotland and her people, please say no on September the 18th. This video cost nothing to make, nothing to post, and the opinions are my own. My name is Jim Swift, I'm an economist and I care about my country and its people.